Okay, today we're talking about voyeurism, or peeping, in other words. It's one thing to peep at your sister in the shower when you're 13, but actually fetishizing over it, that's voyeurism. And it's up to you to decide if it's downright nasty or rather something fun, if done with consent and in the right settings. One's for sure, by the end of this video, you'll definitely know how to spot a peeper and what to show to her when you finally meet one. Okay, voyeurism, as a sexual practice, has deep roots in human history, possibly dating back to early human tribes. Anthropologists and historians suggest it might have been common in these communities, which often lived in close quarters with minimal privacy. This environment could have normalized watching others during intimate moments. Some theories propose voyeurism served social or cultural roles, offering learning opportunities about sexual behaviors and reproduction, crucial for the tribe's survival. It might also have been part of rituals or rites of passage, with younger members observing to understand their future roles. Speculative theories suggest voyeurism helped establish dominance or hierarchy within the group, providing insights into relationships and power dynamics essential for social cohesion. Examining archaeological evidence, cave paintings, and artifacts from early human settlements reveals indirect clues about potential voyeuristic practices. These depictions often include sexually explicit scenes or group activities, suggesting communal interaction during intimate moments. However, concrete evidence is limited, as much of our understanding of early human sexual behaviors relies on archaeological findings and studies of contemporary indigenous tribes. In ancient Greece, voyeurism, deriving sexual pleasure from watching others naked or engaged in sexual activities, was not uncommon. This behavior intertwined with cultural norms and structures of that society, often documented in literature and artwork. Public baths, gymnasiums, and symposiums, where nudity and sexual activities occurred, provided opportunities for voyeurism. The significance of physical beauty and the body in Greek culture further encouraged such behaviors. However, voyeurism was not universally accepted, with views varying significantly. Some saw it as a violation of privacy and ethics, but the normalization of public nudity blurred these lines. A notable example is the myth of Actaeon, a hunter who accidentally saw the goddess Artemis bathing. As punishment, Artemis turned him into a stag, and he was torn apart by his own hunting dogs. Visual depictions in pottery reveal that voyeuristic scenes were common themes. In addition, voyeurism in ancient Greece was linked to educational settings, particularly in gymnasiums where young men trained nude. The interplay between mentorship and physical admiration blurred boundaries, creating a complex dynamic with erotic undertone. This was evident in pederasty, a socially acknowledged romantic relationship between an adult male and a younger male, often involving educational and physical training. While rooted in mentorship, the inherent physical admiration occasionally fostered voyeuristic sentiments. Greek literature, especially works by Aristophanes, featured themes of voyeurism, reflecting broader societal engagement. Their texts suggest that while voyeurism was acknowledged, it was also a subject of ethical and philosophical discussions, reflecting its complex place in Greek society. In contrast, in ancient Rome, voyeurism was curiosity-driven, reflective of the society's relationship with sexuality. It was woven into cultural practices in public life. The Romans were renowned for public baths, serving as social hubs. Men and women, though usually separated, often appeared in various states of undress. This bathing culture fostered voyeuristic behavior, masked as socialization and hygiene. Sexuality in Rome was more openly displayed and discussed, with art and literature depicting erotic scenes. This permissiveness translated into a tolerance for voyeuristic acts, especially among the elite. Gladiatorial games offered a form of voyeurism, where boundaries between violence and eroticism blurred. The Colosseum showcased the human form in extreme conditions to large audiences. Thus, one could say ancient Roman voyeurism was a product of its society's open attitude towards sexuality and public spectacle. Wealthy Romans often displayed explicit imagery in their homes as a sign of sophistication and elite status. Mythology included voyeuristic tales, like Actaeon observing Diana bathing and facing dire consequences. Brothels and lupanars catered to voyeuristic desires, with explicit paintings on their walls, allowing patrons to indulge before participating. Female slaves were often used for entertainment, involving voyeuristic elements where masters and guests watched intimate acts. Still, voyeurism transcended class boundaries. Even the lower classes engaged in it, though in less luxurious settings. Tolerance varied based on context and individuals involved. A respected Roman citizen might face few repercussions, whereas a lower status person might not enjoy the same leniency. Voyeurism in the Middle Ages was intertwined with social norms, religious influences, and legal constraints. Public and private lives were less distinct, facilitating voyeuristic behaviors. Architectural designs in medieval towns and castles often lacked privacy, resulting in unintended visibility into private spaces. Public baths, especially in cities like Paris and London, became notorious for such activities. The sparse use of curtains or shutters in homes allowed for further unintended exposure. Religious context profoundly shaped attitudes towards sexuality and voyeurism. The Catholic Church, dominating medieval Europe, held strict views on sexual morality. Instances of voyeurism were recorded even within monastic settings, where monks and nuns lived under vows of chastity. The tension between religious doctrine and human desire created a complex environment where voyeurism thrived. Legal texts and literature from the period provide evidence of voyeurism and its societal implications. Medieval law codes occasionally addressed illicit peeking. For example, the Lex Voyeuristic, a legal code of the Bavarians, included fines for those caught spying on bathing women. Nobles and royals, with access to private chambers, were not immune. Servants and guards often witnessed their masters' intimate activities. Such incidents appear in court records and personal diaries. Stories like the Decameron depict scenes where lovers are spied upon, highlighting a cultural obsession with hidden glances and secret encounters. This suggests societal fascination with watching and acknowledges its presence in daily life. Medieval artwork, including illuminated manuscripts, woodcuts, and frescoes, also occasionally depicted illicit watching. In addition, village life, with its close-knit communities and shared spaces, often facilitated voyeuristic activities. Medieval homes, built with minimal separation between public and private areas, created opportunities to observe others' private moments. Seasonal events like harvest festivals or communal gatherings contributed to voyeurism. During these occasions, social boundaries relaxed, and alcohol consumption led to uninhibited behaviors. Interactions among common folk were less scrutinized, turning such gatherings into spaces where voyeuristic actions occurred more freely. Reports from the time indicate that peeping toms and illicit watchers were not always male. Women also engaged in voyeurism, though less frequently documented due to gender biases in record-keeping. Historical references highlight women watching men or other women, usually in settings like bathhouses or communal activities. The law, reflecting church doctrines and societal mores, generally condemned voyeuristic behavior, but enforcement varied. Punishments ranged from fines to public shaming, depending on the offender's social standing and the act's severity. Despite strict prohibitions, human nature often led to transgressions. Clerical records reveal how authorities addressed voyeurism. Parishioners' confessions frequently included voyeuristic acts. Penance involved public admission, specific prayers, or pilgrimages, aiming to correct moral failings and maintain order. From home and public space architecture to moral and legal codes enforced by church and state, voyeurism was woven into medieval life. Moving on to the 16th and 17th centuries, where voyeurism was secretly present. Despite societal disapproval, it persisted across Europe. Diaries and letters of the time occasionally mention these activities cautiously due to societal norms. Pietro Aretino, an Italian author and playwright, is a key figure in the study of voyeurism from this period. His explicit writings, especially his erotic sonnets, reflect the era's hidden fascination with observing sexual activity. Aretino's scandalous yet popular works suggest an undercurrent of voyeurism in Renaissance culture. The Catholic Church's stance on moral conduct made voyeurism a taboo topic. Despite this, peeping holes in public baths and communal sleeping arrangements offered ample opportunities for voyeurism. In England, late 16th century moral reform efforts aimed to curb such behavior. Anti-voyeurism laws were enacted, though enforcement was inconsistent. The prevalence of voyeurism is also evident in the art of the period. Artists like Hieronymus Bosch depicted voyeuristic scenes, indicating public awareness and perhaps tacit acceptance of the practice. The upper class had more opportunities and means to engage in voyeuristic practices. Nobles and wealthy merchants could afford large estates with multiple rooms, making various parts of their homes vulnerable to voyeuristic intrusions. In bathhouses, the layout often included secluded areas with gaps in the walls, allowing people to secretly observe others. English theaters were known for risque performances, and private boxes rented by the elite allowed discreet observation of both the stage and fellow audience members. Punishments for voyeurism varied but were generally lenient, with social embarrassment being the most severe consequence rather than formal judicial penalties. Offenders were often scolded or fined, indicating that while voyeurism was frowned upon, it was not considered a grave offense unless it escalated to more intrusive actions. The Church's influence meant many acts of voyeurism were addressed in confessional booths rather than courtrooms. In rural areas, communal lifestyles limited privacy, increasing voyeurism targets. Early optical devices like telescopes and magnifying glasses, primarily used for scientific discovery, also opened new avenues for voyeurism. This form of voyeurism differed from crude spying, reflecting a growing curiosity about human anatomy and the natural world. The period also saw increased awareness and documentation of sexual deviance and non-normative behaviors, partly due to sensational pamphlets and broadsheets. These publications often blurred the lines between moral outrage and prurient interest. The Renaissance and Reformation brought significant changes in science, religion, and politics, which took precedence over moral policing of private behaviors. As we move into the 19th century, the landscape of voyeurism began to change. Industrialization brought about significant shifts in society, leading to an increase in urban populations and the growth of a new working class. In the 19th century, although the term voyeurism wasn't widely used, the practice existed and was often condemned by societal norms. The Victorian era, under Queen Victoria's reign from 1837 to 1901, emphasized modesty and sexual restraint. However, beneath this prudish exterior, voyeurism thrived. Rapid urbanization and population growth led to crowded living conditions, reducing privacy and creating opportunities for voyeuristic activities. Technological innovations also contributed. The development of peep shows provided new means for voyeuristic pleasure. Public reaction was typically one of moral outrage, with action sometimes taken to curb such activities. Peeping toms, a term for voyeurs, faced severe social stigma and legal consequences if caught. The era was marked by hypocrisies, as those who publicly condemned such behavior often participated in it privately. This dichotomy highlighted the tension between public virtue and private vice. The advent of photography in the 1830s revolutionized image capture, and soon, portable and covert photographic equipment allowed voyeurs to surreptitiously capture intimate moments. By the 1850s, stereo cards, providing three-dimensional views, gained popularity. Marketed as educational tools or harmless entertainment, they often featured erotic content, subtly catering to voyeuristic desires. Urban public spaces like parks and theaters facilitated voyeurism by offering numerous observation venues. Bathhouses, with their communal and semi-private areas where nudity was common, became hotbeds of voyeuristic activity. The allure of voyeurism was heightened by strict moral codes of the time, rendering any form of sexuality or nudity taboo, thus intensifying the thrill of clandestine observation. As the 19th century ended, voyeurism evolved with cultural and technological shifts. The late 1800s introduced kinetoscopes and early motion pictures, bringing moving images to the masses. These mediums also carried erotic content. Voyeuristic themes appeared in early films, reflecting a fascination with illicit observation. Urbanization created settings like apartment buildings and boarding houses, where thin walls and shared amenities reduced privacy and made clandestine watching easier. Regulatory frameworks began addressing these practices. Censorship laws and public decency regulations increasingly targeted sexual content in print, photography, and early cinema. However, these measures were not entirely effective, and black markets for explicit material thrived. The medicalization of sexual behavior gained traction. Figures like Richard von Krafft-Ebing categorized and pathologized sexual preferences, including voyeurism, in works like Psychopathia Sexualis. This medical perspective shifted public discourse, framing voyeurism as a psychological issue rather than a moral failing, but also led to stigmatization and controversial treatments. The covert nature of voyeurism made eradication difficult, and despite public condemnations and legal measures, it remained an enduring aspect of 19th century society. And as voyeurism has existed for centuries, often frowned upon as deviant behavior, 20th century brought significant changes in its perception. Cinema, as a popular entertainment form, offered new opportunities, especially with films featuring explicit or suggestive content. Early 20th century films began pushing acceptable boundaries, with directors like Alfred Hitchcock exploring voyeuristic themes. For instance, Hitchcock's 1954 film Rear Window revolves around a man obsessed with watching his neighbors, highlighting voyeurism's allure and danger. The 1960s and 1970s saw a cultural shift with the sexual revolution, further pushing boundaries of acceptable sexuality and voyeuristic content. This era saw a rise in adult films and magazines, making voyeuristic content more accessible. The 1980s advent of home video systems brought pornographic content into private homes, embedding voyeuristic practices in mainstream culture. The late 1990s and early 2000s internet revolution marked another significant shift. Online platforms facilitated unprecedented exchange and consumption of voyeuristic content, often blurring public and private lines. Privacy concerns grew as hidden cameras and voyeuristic websites proliferated, leading to diverse legal and ethical controversies that persist today. In the 1970s, adult films like Deep Throat and Emmanuel became cultural phenomena, normalizing voyeuristic content. The industry thrived, creating a multi-billion-dollar market that impacted mainstream cinema and media. In the 1980s, cable television's rise saw dedicated adult channels surge in viewership. Voyeurism became commercialized through adult video stores and peep shows. Celebrities often faced public exposure from leaked private tapes, sparking discussions about voyeurism. This era also introduced video nasties and underground videos with explicit content. Private satellite channels further increased access to voyeuristic material. The 1990s saw the internet revolutionize access to porn, allowing private consumption at home. Websites featuring voyeurism and hidden camera content grew rapidly, raising ethical and legal concerns about consent and privacy. Governments and legal institutions struggled to regulate content while balancing freedom of expression. As the 21st century approached, voyeurism evolved with technological advancements. The explosion of reality TV in the late 1990s and 2000s, exemplified by Big Brother, brought voyeurism into mainstream entertainment. These shows thrived on constant surveillance, allowing audiences to watch others in their private moments. The blurred lines between public and private further fueled voyeuristic tendencies. Social media platforms, emerging in the early 2000s, provided new venues for voyeurism. Platforms like MySpace, Facebook, Instagram, and Snapchat allowed users to share intimate aspects of their lives, often unwittingly inviting voyeuristic attention. The advent of smartphones with high-quality cameras made capturing and sharing private moments easier, sometimes without consent. Mobile applications for video streaming and live broadcasts amplified this phenomenon. The rise of deepfake technology, creating synthetic videos featuring real individuals, presents new challenges and ethical concerns. Legal frameworks struggle to adapt as voyeurism integrates with daily life through evolving digital landscapes. The ease of accessing and disseminating voyeuristic content raises significant questions about consent, privacy, and moral boundaries. And to end it all, here's a story of the most legendary voyeur throughout history. Her tale begins in the 15th century, in the kingdom of Lydia. Gyges of Lydia, born in 7th century BC. Gyges of Lydia, a bodyguard to King Candaules, is noted for a story involving fate, secrecy, and power struggles. King Candaules, proud of his wife's beauty, devised a plan for Gyges to secretly observe the queen. When Gyges saw the queen naked, she later confronted him with an ultimatum: kill the king and seize the throne, or face execution. Choosing survival, Gyges killed Candaules. With the queen's and some military support, Gyges became king, establishing a new dynasty. Initially driven by survival, his reign was significant, fortifying the kingdom through territorial expansion and economic growth. However, questions about his legitimacy and the means of acquiring power persisted. Seeking divine endorsement, Gyges consulted the Oracle of Delphi, which affirmed his rule but prophesied his dynasty's fall to the Heraclides in the 5th generation. This prophecy haunted the Lydian line, reminding each ruler of the impending doom tied to Gyges' original sin. Gyges lived with the weight of his decisions, creating a flourishing kingdom overshadowed by its dark origins. Gyges' story became a cautionary tale throughout history. Gyges' son, Artus, succeeded him, expanding and strengthening Lydia. The prophecy's fear loomed large, influencing their politics and military campaigns. The collapse came during Croesus' reign, Gyges' wealthy descendant. Croesus misinterpreted an oracle's prophecy and waged war against the Persian Empire, leading to his defeat and fulfilling the curse.